We're seeing red today on History Calling as I take you through my top 10 most iconic red dresses in history using a collection of stunning art created over the course of many centuries. Some of them you'll recognise, some of them are hidden gems, but in each case I'll tell you why I think these dresses and images are so special and why the world has been and continues to be so in love with the colour red. Make sure you stay till the end for a bonus entry discussing a person whose red outfit is world famous, but who isn't even real. And now, let's delve into the world of the ladies in red. First of all, I'd like to give a quick shout out to another YouTube channel called Modern Girls, whose creator has a series of videos looking at different colour dresses in cinematic history. That series was the inspiration behind this video, though there won't be overlap as I'm looking at historical dresses generally worn in the quote-unquote real world and not those worn as costumes on screen. There's one exception to my real world rule, but it's still not a cinematic costume, and you'll understand what I mean very shortly because it's the first one on my list. Nevertheless, I just wanted to acknowledge the great work Modern Girls does and her impact here. If you enjoyed this video, you should definitely check out her series, and I'll leave her playlist on coloured dresses in film linked below for you. The red dresses discussed here are presented in chronological order, and naturally they are just my favourites. I could only choose a few for reasons of time as well, and so I do know that there are many others seen in images from throughout history and all across the world, a lot of which I'm probably just not aware of. Therefore, please don't get annoyed if you don't see a dress you love. Instead, pop its details in the comments, and if there's enough material, I will do a part 2 for you. That's assuming, of course, that this video does well, as it's a bit of a test balloon for this type of content here on History Calling. So if you'd like to see more fashion and art history documentaries like this, where I look at outfits by colour, please make sure to give this one a like and a comment, as that really helps to promote it with YouTube. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, with the notification bell switched on. Some of you sometimes tell me that your notifications aren't working, so if you're already subscribed, it might be worth checking your notification status. I read somewhere that notifications can be deactivated if your device has had an update, but I don't know if that's true. The colour red has a myriad of associations depending on the context. It can variously be connected to love and romance, just think of the profusion of red roses and hearts around Valentine's Day, aggression and anger, danger or confidence, injury and death, evil and the devil, and even politics. In China, it's linked with good luck, and in Britain and Ireland, it's been the colour of nobility for centuries, thus the red coronets and cloaks that lords and ladies wear for formal events like coronations. When used in clothing like this, it can have an effect on both the wearer and the viewer. A 2012 study, for instance, found that waitresses wearing red t-shirts got more tips from male customers, though it had no effect on female customer tipping habits. In the past, depending on the sumptuary laws in existence at a given time and in a given location, meaning the laws regulating the colours and fabric of what people of different social ranks could wear, it could indicate a person's social status. Probably the women on my list today weren't looking for tips or dates, but bear in mind what else they might have been trying to convey when they either opted to be painted in this most striking of colours, or when the artist chose to put them in that hue. First up, we have a woman whose historicity is debated, but whose impact on the world has nevertheless been profound. This is the Virgin Mary with the infant Jesus, as shown in Jan van Eyck's 1437 painting Luca Madonna, and please forgive the stupid little modesty patches which I have to put on to keep YouTube happy. The model for this version of Mary was possibly the artist's wife Margherita, and the red of her huge, flowing and bejewelled dress draws our attention immediately to her. There are other reds in the painting, see the carpet for instance, but the shade chosen for the dress drowns them out and keeps our eyes on Mary. The use of so much red indicates the expense of the painting and the confidence the artist had in his abilities, as he wasn't scared to use this precious liquid to create his work, while the colour and the use of expensive velvet indicates Mary's royal position as the Queen of Heaven. This wasn't the only time that Van Eyck depicted Jesus with his mother in red. We see them again in a similar layout in The Virgin and Child with Canon Joris van der Pijl, painted in 1436, and we see the artist's love of the colour more generally in his other work, including one image of his wife in a red dress and one which is assumed to be him in a spectacular red hat. Clearly, red was very important to him. Next, we have a picture I've had a soft spot for a long time. It shows Margaret of Austria, daughter of Emperor Maximilian I and later a mentor of Anne Boleyn's. She is only 10 years old here, for it was painted by Jean Hay in 1490, and it is now held by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This very serious-looking little girl wears a dress of red velvet with ermine cuffs, along with a golden headdress trimmed with black velvet. This fabulously expensive outfit is listed in an inventory of her possessions taken in 1493, so we know it was real and not an imagining of the artists. It complements the pelican brooch she wears, which shows the pelican piercing its chest to feed its young, symbolic of Christ's sacrifice for humanity, and which contains a beautiful ruby that almost matches the shade of the velvet. The brooch sits on a fleur-de-lis, symbolic of the French throne, for Margaret was at this time engaged to the future Charles VIII of France, and it is also listed in an inventory of Margaret's possessions. The religious symbolism of the painting, as well as the pelican, note that Margaret is also clutching her rosary beads, indicate her piety, and by extension show that red was not automatically associated with lust or wanton behaviour, or a proper Renaissance princess like Margaret wouldn't be wearing it. The colour red is also picked up in the tiny C's and M's which we see down the collar of her dress, and which stand for Charles and Margaret, and the entire ensemble has obviously been chosen with great care to maximise the symbolism being shown by this painting and by Margaret's devotion to France, whilst also showing off her father's wealth and good taste, as he can buy her clothes and jewels like this. The colour also pops out at us from her lips, though I'm not sure we should take too much from that. Unfortunately for Margaret, Charles later dumped her, so this show of loyalty and devotion to him and his country was all for nothing. We now come to Leonardo da Vinci's La Belle Ferronnière, painted between 1495 and 1499 and probably showing Isabel of Aragon, Duchess of Milan, though the identification is up for debate and it was long thought to be a mistress of the king, Francis I. Maybe the red of her dress was even associated with lust. The painting's name comes from the style of the headband the sitter is wearing, and in its day it was arguably as famous as the Mona Lisa. The red of the sitter's dress is reflected in her skin on the underside of her face, showing Da Vinci's incredible understanding of light, and it perfectly complements the gold and touches of white elsewhere in her outfit, giving us an impression of rich elegance, but nothing too showy. Moving on, here we have a famous Tudor queen, the first of 3 on our list. This is Jane Seymour, third wife of Henry VIII, painted by Hans Holbein the Younger in either the latter half of 1536 or in 1537 when she was pregnant with her only child, the future Edward VI. It shows her in 3/4 length, lips pursed, hands clasped demurely in front of her, and a modest golden English gable hood on her head with a black veil covering up her hair, though the square cut of the dress is typically revealing for this era. The overdress is dark red velvet trimmed with matching rubies in quatrefoils and alternating with sets of 4 pearls. The same combination of jewels appears around her headdress, her waist and in her necklace, which also has a large pendant showing a ruby over a possible diamond and ending in a teardrop pearl. This is the Tudor consort necklace, which appears in pictures of most of Henry's wives and indicates Jane's new position. I have a video on it which I'll leave linked for you, as it's one of the most recognisable and important pieces of Tudor jewellery we know of. Her brooch, by the way, spells out IHS, the Greek for Jesus. We have Holbein's initial drawing for this picture, and the painting itself exists in a few iterations, with slightly different jewellery in each, and is, I would argue, the best known image of this queen, who died after childbirth in October 1537. I've seen numerous recreations of it on TV shows and on wax figures of Jane, but what always remains, even if the jewels change, is the red of her dress. It was designed, of course, to show wealth and good taste and her elevation to queenship. But this is the woman who had just helped to break up Henry's second marriage to Anne Boleyn, resulting in the latter's execution. And when I see her here, decked out in the colour of lust and blood, and wearing jewels which had been on Anne's clothing and around her neck not long before, I can't help but think of the negative connotations we associate with this colour. I have a very different reaction to the red and gold dress we see on Jane's successor, Anne of Cleves, also painted by Holbein a couple of years later in 1539 during marriage negotiations for her union with Henry. Though there are similarities in the colour scheme and its 3/4 length size, the style of the dress and headdress, which are from Anne's native Cleves rather than of an English design, are completely different, with the dress's voluminous shoulders pinched in above the elbows and a modesty patch inserted into the open front, which covers Anne right up to her neck. Though her hands are clasped like Jane's, Anne's pose is otherwise very different too, as she stares straight out at the viewer with a neutral expression. She is auditioning for the role of queen, not showing off a position already attained. This is the reason she is wearing what we might assume is her best dress and most expensive jewellery. She needs to look like she is fit to be the consort of the King of England, whom she has never met. She needs to be eye-catching and exude quiet confidence, and nothing achieves that quite like this gorgeous dress, which is of a much brighter hue than that of Jane's and catches your eye from across a room as a result. Though Anne is remembered for her quiet nature and pliant personality, in this instance her family needed her to shine, and so there was no demure burgundy or maroon for her. Though there is another portrait of her done a few years later during her time in England, this one in the red and gold dress is hands down our most famous image of her, and has been recreated many times in miniatures, on screen, and in wax depictions of Henry's fourth queen. Of course, the painting, and by extension the dress, are famous for all the wrong reasons. Though Henry accepted Anne as a bride based partly on this image, he took an instant dislike to her upon meeting her, and their marriage lasted only 6 months before he dumped her for her lady-in-waiting, the teenage Catherine Howard. Henry did not, however, state that he had any problems with Anne's face. Instead, it was her body, so well hidden under this incredible red dress, which he said was unpleasant, and he cast aspersions on her virtue before marriage, which was a bit rich coming from a guy who consistently cheated on his wives and even killed one of them, but Henry didn't have much self-awareness in such matters. The painting went through a restoration in the early 2020s, which cleaned it up marvellously and really brought out the vibrancy of the red. It is now housed in the Louvre in Paris, and if you get the chance to see it, please do so. In the meantime, I have a video which takes a deep dive into this picture and the story behind it, which I'll leave linked below for you. The last Tudor queen who will appear on this list is the young Elizabeth I, aged about 13 and appearing here in circa 1546 in her first ever solo portrait, though she had popped up a couple of years earlier in the famous Family of Henry VIII portrait with her father, dead stepmother Jane Seymour and siblings, wearing a matching dress to her sister Mary's with a burgundy underskirt and sleeves. This is one of my favourite pictures of Elizabeth, painted long before she retreated behind the ageless mask of Gloriana, and in it we see this young, motherless girl wearing a statement red dress with matching French hood, very stylish by the way, all trimmed in pearls and golden buttons with dark gemstones in the centre. Unlike Jane Seymour and Anne of Cleves, her hands are not clasped together. Instead, she holds a book in them, showing off her famously long and elegant fingers, of which she was very proud, and one of which is marking a page while a slip of paper marks another. A second book, probably a Bible, is open on a lectern behind her, and the whole scene is set in her bedroom. Elizabeth was famous for her intellect, and this portrait shows it off. She's no wallflower pretending she can't hold her own in an intellectual conversation. She's clever, well-educated, and pious too, of course, and she knows it. I see her confidence in the choice of this red dress, for despite her mother's scandalous end and being declared illegitimate and stripped of her title of princess at the age of 2 by her father, at the time this painting was commissioned, Elizabeth was riding high, having been recently restored to the line of succession. She had everything to be happy about, as she was well and truly back in the Tudor fold, and had no need to fake confidence as we might argue Jane and Anne of Cleves did. Elizabeth was the real deal. This dress is also an early example of her love of beautiful fashion and her ability to communicate through it, whether it be via the colour, which matches her fiery red hair too, or through later dresses like that seen in the famous rainbow portrait, which has her covered in eyes and ears, able to see and hear everything in her kingdom. This dress was recreated for the short-lived TV show Becoming Elizabeth in stunning detail, and though I know you're probably tired of hearing this, I have a video dedicated to just this picture which will give you far more detail about it than I'm sharing here, and I'll leave that linked below for you. The next portrait is of a woman I imagine most of you have never heard of. This is Lady Mary Boyle, formerly O'Brien, daughter of the Earl of Inchiquin and wife of Lieutenant Colonel Henry Boyle. She is nursing her third son, Charles, and the portrait dates to 1690, though the year 1687 also appears on it, but that's a later edition. It was painted by the famed artist Sir Godfrey Kneller. A member of 2 prominent Irish families in the late 17th century, Mary was a trailblazer of her time with this image, for it is believed to be the first ever portrait of a mother breastfeeding her own child in British and Irish art, presumably discounting religious images of Mary and Jesus, which this certainly resembles, given the sitter's name and her veil. Given the potentially scandalous nature of this portrait, I see confidence in her choice of the red dress and her steady, defiant gaze out at the viewer. That an aristocratic lady should be nursing her own child and allowing the artist to capture the moment is remarkable, but at the time, wet nurses were being discouraged by some Protestant preachers, and Mary was a Protestant convert, because they thought the child's personality could be shaped by exposure to a woman's milk, and therefore only its mother should feed it. Perhaps Mary agreed. Perhaps she just wanted to take care of her child herself, regardless. After her husband Henry died fighting alongside the Duke of Marlborough in 1693, she married twice more, to Sir Thomas Dilkes, then to Colonel John Irwin. Baby Charles grew up to join the Navy. We travel to India for the next incredible dress. This 1772 portrait by English painter Tilly Kettle is held at the Yale Centre for British Art in New Haven, whose website is where the information following has been gleaned from, and is currently entitled A Woman Holding a Hookah at Faizabad, India. We don't know who she is, it's even possible she's imaginary, but she's wearing a gorgeous red sari with some gold in there as well, and golden jewellery to match. According to the YCBA, she might be a member of the household, an entertainer at court, or a representation of ideal beauty. And her outfit is in line with that worn by women who performed the Nautch dance to court elites and East India Company officials. These women are sometimes associated with prostitution, but many were highly educated courtesans and noblewomen, and Kettle's richly dressed figure may have had that status. Such women were also granted the rank of celebrities at times, and the opportunity to see them perform was highly prized by Western visitors. The painting has been cut down at some point, and it is likely that there was a man off to our left to whom she is gesturing and offering the hookah pipe she is holding. In this case, the red makes the dancer the centre of attention and helps to exude the confidence she would have needed as a performer at the royal court. It may also be interpreted as a reference to her sexuality. Back to Europe now, and to France, to see the German-born Marie Antoinette and 3 of her children. This image was painted by Elizabeth Louise Vigée-Lebrun in 1787, just before the chaos of the French Revolution, and was commissioned by the King, Louis XVI, to try to improve his wife Marie Antoinette's reputation, damaged by a number of scandals and reports of her extravagance. It was to do this by focusing on her motherhood. It shows the Queen seated, wearing a deep red dress and matching elaborate hat over the top of her huge wig. Her daughter, Marie-Thérèse, is on our left, holding her mother's arm and resting her head against Marie Antoinette's shoulder. The Queen holds the future Louis XVII on her lap, and her older son, Louis Joseph, is to our right, holding up a cloth over an empty cradle with one hand and pointing to it with his other. The reference is to his little sister, Sophie Beatrice, who had died of TB as an infant this same year, 1787, and in fact, Marie-Thérèse would be the only one of the Queen's children who got to grow up. The group appear to be standing next to the entranceway into the famous Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. The painting is full of symbolism, from the arrangement of the figures in a triangular shape to hark back to religious imagery which showed the Holy Family in such a composition, to the presence of Marie Antoinette's jewellery cabinet, which is at the back of the image, slightly blended in with the wall, showing that her attention is much more focused on her children. The Queen herself wears barely any jewellery too, just to hammer the point home further that her children are her jewels. The red dress is no exception when it comes to symbolism. According to the Art in Context website, its colour references Queen Marie Leszczyńską, the Polish-born wife of King Louis XV and another Queen of France, but one with a better reputation, known for her charitable endeavours and for having had herself painted on numerous occasions in red dresses. This warm colour is also picked up in Marie Antoinette's daughter's dress, which is a deep maroon shade and echoes what the mother is wearing, while Louis Joseph is in orange with a little dash of red on his chest. The whole effect, with the rich velvet materials that the group are dressed in, is luxurious and cosy, a very different use of red to many of the other pictures discussed in this video. Just before we get to the finale and the bonus picture I promised you at the beginning of the video, I wanted to let you know that you can get more from me by becoming a patron over on my Patreon site, where I release bonus material every week, including early access to ad-free videos, extra podcasts, and recommendations for other great content on the web. This week, for instance, I'll be providing a discussion of another famous red dress, which was too naughty to discuss here, plus a link to a great podcast all about the psychology of colour. Many of my posts can also be bought as a one-off if you don't want to commit to a monthly membership. The link is below for you, as is a link to my website, historycallingofficial.com, where you can get 2 free downloads to help you recognise good history books versus bad and interview your family members about your family tree. These are available if you sign up to my free mailing list. Lastly, there's a link in the description box too for my book, Find Your Irish Ancestors Online, available from Amazon as both an ebook and a paperback. For our final red dress, we're coming into the late 20th century to look at Nancy Reagan, First Lady of the United States from 1981 to 1989. She is painted here in 1987 by Aaron Schickler, wearing a full-length bright red gown with long sleeves, draping at the back and a high neckline offset by a 5-string pearl choker and earrings. Red pointed shoes poke out at the bottom and really remind me for some reason of Dorothy's red slippers in The Wizard of Oz. The colour is also picked up in the light blush on her cheeks and the red of her lips. The silhouette of the dress is actually quite restrained for the late 1980s, when voluminous sleeves and huge shoulder pads were most definitely in fashion. Anne of Cleves would have been right at home now that I think about it. And Nancy looks contemplative, statuesque and elegant, staring off into the distance with her back straight and her hands behind her. The colour of the dress is very strong and really makes her pop out against the dark wood of the door she stands in front of, with the lighting set up in such a way that only the First Lady is really properly illuminated. Red was a colour Nancy liked. It's a picker-upper, she once said, and she wore it many times, including to her husband Ronald's first inauguration, where it really made her stand out in the crowd, as you can see here. She looked and obviously felt great in it, and it soon became known as Reagan Red, a shade so striking that it exuded her power as First Lady, known the world over and able to operate on a global stage. She even wore it to host Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip in 1983, and look at how it makes her stand out against the otherwise dull palette of this photograph on a day when California was having some seriously glum weather. It's no coincidence that the dress still looks so good today either. Nancy was known for her impeccable style, and this portrait, which now hangs in the Vermeil room at the White House with those of other First Ladies, shows it off to a T. Alright gang, time for your bonus dress from one of the First Ladies of fairy tales. It is, of course, Little Red Riding Hood, sometimes shown in just a red cloak and hood with a dress of another colour, sometimes decked out in all red. Made famous by the Brothers Grimm retelling of the story in the 19th century, the fairy tale likely dates much further back and tells the story of a little girl in a red cape who goes into the forest to bring her grandmother some food and meets a wolf along the way. The wolf goes ahead of her to her grandma's house, eats the old woman, and then dresses in her clothes to pretend to be her when Little Red Riding Hood arrives. After some conversation, he eats her too, and in some versions of the tale, that's that, while in others, she and her grandmother are saved by a woodcutter or hunter who cuts them out of the wolf's belly. The red of her cloak is what makes this story so famous, for it makes the little girl stand out in the green forest and signifies the danger she is in from the wolf and perhaps the blood that will be spilt when she and her grandmother are eaten and when the wolf is cut open. Such is the story's power that any little girl dressed in red is liable to find herself called Little Red Riding Hood as a nickname, and a girl or woman throwing on a red cloak at Halloween makes for a simple but highly effective costume. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of my list of some of the best red dresses in history. Let me know in the comments which one is your favourite and why, and any that I missed. And for more art history, try one of these videos next. Whatever you choose, please enjoy, and until next time, keep learning.